My name is Keth Voren, and I have spent 43 years of my life studying dangerous things. I have stood at the edge of observation decks and watched creatures the size of mountains tear through steel hulls like paper. I have reviewed footage of hive-mind organisms consuming entire ecosystems in a matter of days. I have filed threat assessments on species that communicate through electromagnetic pulses powerful enough to fry unshielded equipment at close range. I have done all of this without losing sleep. I am losing sleep now. The subject of my current report is humanity. You may laugh. Many of my colleagues did at first. Humans, those short-lived, soft-skinned, emotionally chaotic bipeds from the third planet of an unremarkable star system. Humans, with their bizarre attachment to pets, and their inexplicable love of loud music, and their habit of running long distances for no practical reason whatsoever. Humans, who smile at strangers and hold doors open for people they will never see again. Yes, those ones. I am genuinely, professionally, scientifically afraid of those ones. Let me tell you what I saw. It was a routine reassessment. Humanity had been classified as a Class 3 mild threat roughly a century ago by a junior analyst who, I suspect, spent most of his time watching their entertainment broadcasts and concluded they were harmless. The classification had never been updated. I was dispatched to verify it, update the file, and move on. I expected to be done within a month. I am now in my 7th month of observation, and I have not moved on. My platform was cloaked in low orbit on my 3rd day when I first noticed something strange. A construction crew was working on a collapsed bridge in one of their mid-sized cities. Heavy equipment, dust everywhere, workers in protective gear moving in the organized chaos that seems to define everything humans do. I was watching mostly out of boredom. Then a steel support beam, 400 kilograms. My instruments confirmed this. 400 kilograms of industrial-grade reinforced steel slipped from its rigging and fell. One of the workers was directly below it. Another worker, standing to the side, moved. Not quickly by the standards of most predatory species I have cataloged, but certainly with purpose. He stepped under the falling beam and caught it. With his arms, bare arms, covered only by a thin fabric sleeve. He caught it, staggered slightly, held the beam long enough for the other worker to roll clear, and then let the beam down with a grunt. I sat very still for a moment. He rolled his shoulders. He picked up the water canteen he had dropped when he moved. He looked at the dent in it, said something to his colleagues, they laughed, and went back to work. A supervisor came over, appeared to ask if he was all right. He waved a hand in the universal gesture that means, do not make a fuss. I ran my scans immediately. His arms showed significant bruising, minor soft tissue stress, elevated cortisol, no broken bones, no ruptured anything. The biological load his body had just absorbed should have shattered both forearms and dislocated both shoulders. According to everything I know about structural biology, he should have been on the ground. He was drinking from his dented canteen. I filed my first anomaly report that evening. I noted in the margins that I was probably overreacting. I no longer believe I was overreacting. Over the following weeks, I pulled archived footage I had previously dismissed. Humans have a particular category of public entertainment they call sporting competitions, and within that category, there exists a subgenre dedicated entirely to tests of physical strength. I had reviewed this footage during my initial survey and classified it as cultural bravado, posturing, the kind of theatrical display of power that social species often use to establish hierarchy. I was wrong. It was not posturing. They were not exaggerating. I watched a human being drag a cargo ship, a full ocean-going vessel, across a distance of more than 20 meters, using a rope attached to a harness around his body. I watched another human lift a stone that my instruments calculated to weigh close to 500 kilograms above his head. I watched 2 humans lock hands across a table and attempt to force each other's arms down, and I noticed, with growing unease, that both of them were clearly restraining themselves in the early rounds, calibrating their force to the resistance they felt from the other person. That last part is what lodged in my mind like a splinter. They were calibrating, automatically, without thinking about it. The incident that truly changed my understanding happened during my 5th week. I was observing a residential area when a small ground vehicle collided with a structural pillar and overturned, pinning one of the occupants, a child, I determined, roughly 8 years of age in human terms, beneath the door panel. The child's guardian, a human female of older age, small by even human standards, arrived on the scene within moments of the collision. I watched her assess the situation. I watched her biometrics spike, heart rate, cortisol, a particular hormonal compound their own scientists call adrenaline. I had read about adrenaline in their medical literature. I had not truly understood it until that moment. She lifted the vehicle. Not all the way, not effortlessly. She lifted the door panel and frame far enough for the child to be pulled free, held it for approximately 4 seconds, and then let it drop. She then sat down heavily on the ground, which I understand is a normal response to what her muscles had just done. Later I found a human medical paper describing this phenomenon. They call it hysterical strength. They use the word hysterical, as though the terrifying part of the story is that the emotion was excessive. Their own scientists describe it as a flaw in the body's normal inhibitory systems. The brain, apparently, spends most of its time preventing the muscles from exerting their full capacity. This is to protect the tendons, the joints, the skeletal structure, because if humans routinely used everything they had, they would routinely tear themselves apart. The adrenaline response temporarily removes this protection. I read this passage 3 times. Then I sat quietly for a while and thought about what it meant. Every human I had ever observed was operating at a fraction of their potential. Not because they were weakened, because their own nervous system was actively holding them back. And that governor, that careful biological leash, could be removed in an instant by the right emotion. I began paying close attention to the small, everyday moments after that, the ones no one was recording for competitions, the ones humans themselves barely noticed. A man at a food market hefted a crate of goods with one arm, so he could hold the door open for a woman pushing a wheeled transport. He did not strain. He did not think about it. The crate, I noted, was approximately 90 kilograms. 2 children were playing a game that involved one sitting on the other's shoulders. The child on the bottom, who appeared to be perhaps 10 years of age, was laughing and running. I calculated the combined weight. I thought about the fact that no species on my homeworld of comparable size could do this without extensive musculature adaptation. A worker at a manufacturing facility made a motion to stop a rolling machine cart that had gotten away from her. She slapped her palm flat against it. The cart, which had been rolling at a speed that would have broken several of my own species' hand bones on contact, stopped. She looked mildly annoyed and pushed it back into position. No one around her reacted. It was not notable. It was just a thing that happened. I found myself returning to a single, sharp question. Did they know? Did they have any real understanding of what they were? I arranged an anonymous consultation with a human psychologist through an intermediary communication channel. I framed my questions as academic research into species self-perception. I asked whether humans generally had an accurate understanding of their own physical capabilities. She laughed warmly. It was not a dismissive laugh. It was the laugh of someone who finds a question genuinely charming. She said that most humans significantly underestimate their physical capacity in calm states. She said that people are often surprised, sometimes disturbed, by what they find themselves capable of in high-stress situations. She said there was a reason humans did not routinely test their absolute limits. You cannot safely find the ceiling, she explained, because the ceiling is higher than the structure that supports it. You would break yourself getting there. I thanked her and closed the channel. You would break yourself getting there. She said it conversationally, the way one might mention that a particular food was too spicy. A fact of life, a minor inconvenience of biology. I thought about all the species I had classified over my career. The great predators who roar and display and make certain you know exactly what they are capable of before they use it. The armored species who wear their threat on the outside, whose very bodies are a warning. The hive minds who never bother with individual strength at all, because their power is simply the fact that there are so many of them. Every dangerous species I had ever encountered knew it was dangerous. That knowledge shaped everything about how they moved through the universe. It made them predictable, in a way. You knew what they wanted. You knew what would provoke them. You knew the size of the thing you were dealing with. Humans did not know. They went through their days holding doors open, smiling at strangers, placing their hands carefully on each other's shoulders, shaking hands with a calibrated grip, hugging their offspring with precisely enough force and not a fraction more. An entire civilization of beings who could, in the right moment, do extraordinary things. moving through the universe as though they were made of the same fragile stuff as everything around them, because they assumed they were. That was the part I could not stop thinking about. They were not performing gentleness. They were not restraining themselves out of strategy or discipline. They were gentle because they genuinely, fundamentally assumed that the world around them was roughly as delicate as they felt on an ordinary afternoon. They extended this courtesy to the universe without knowing the universe had done nothing to deserve it. On my 6th month, I observed a moment that I expect will stay with me for the rest of my professional life. I was monitoring a residential district where a portion of an older building had partially collapsed during a storm. Emergency crews were already on scene. My instruments were running automatically, cataloging individuals, tracking biometrics, flagging anything unusual. A small, elderly human woman pushed through the barrier tape. I tracked her biometrics out of habit. She was agitated. Her cortisol was elevated. The emergency crew intercepted her, and she said something and pointed. My translation software gave me the word grandchild. She moved toward the debris before the crew could stop her, and she began to lift. Not frantically, not with visible rage, with a kind of absolute, quiet determination that I find, even now, very difficult to describe. She lifted pieces of rubble that grown adult male humans were struggling to shift. A reinforced concrete panel that the crew had been preparing to address with machinery. She braced herself beneath it and moved it. 4 seconds, maybe 5. It dropped when she stepped away. The crew stared at her. She did not stare at them. She was already looking for the next piece to move. They found the child. The child was alive. The woman sat down on a chunk of broken wall and held the child against her chest, and that was all. She did not look at what she had moved. She did not seem to register it as anything other than something that had been in her way. I sat in my observation chair and said nothing for a long time. My report to the directorate is complete. I have recommended that humanity be reclassified from Class 3 mild threat to Class Omega, a tier that, before this assessment, I had never personally used in 43 years of active fieldwork. My colleagues have asked me why I am not recommending containment measures, as is standard for a Class Omega designation. My answer is this. Containment measures require that the contained species be aware of the confrontation. Humans are at their most extraordinary, precisely when something they love is threatened. Any attempt to exert pressure on them, any show of force, any act of aggression, any attempt to establish dominance, would tell them, clearly, that something in the universe wished them harm. That is the one thing I believe we should never do, because here is what I have learned. After 7 months of watching them carry heavy things without noticing, survive things that should not be survived, and move through a universe they have no idea they are strong enough to break. The leash is not a weakness. The leash is a choice they make, without knowing they are making it. They are gentle because they feel gentle. They are careful because they believe care is owed. They soften their grip, not because they have to, but because somewhere deep in the wiring of them, they assume the things they touch deserve to remain whole. That assumption is a gift. I do not believe we should be the ones to take it from them. I have filed my report. I have submitted my recommendation. I have requested a transfer to a quieter assignment, perhaps something involving microorganisms or geological formations, something that cannot smile at me and hold a door open and have absolutely no idea what it is doing. My director asked, before I signed off, whether I was genuinely afraid of them. I told him the truth. I said, I am not afraid of what they would do if they knew. I am afraid of what they could do if they ever, just once, stopped being kind.